So for our opening today, I thought it'd be nice for each person to say one thing that inspires them to do this work. Just a short sentence or something. And I can start. For me, I believe that there's that of spirit in everyone and everything. I believe in the interconnectedness of everything and everybody, and that all is sacred, and that we must, and that inspires me to do the work that I do. Who'd like to go next?
Okay, I just want to clarify. You asked for one thing, and then you said four things.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was bad. Okay. Well, the interconnectedness. Sorry, I was terrible.
I just wanted to be clear.
Okay,
how you count.
Thank you.
I'll go next. What inspires me to do this work is to see the change that Gandhi spoke about.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for modeling, since I didn't.
Pleasure, Linda, anytime.
For me, I can go next. For me, it's a diversity.
Wonderful.
I believe that change is possible.
Right.
Yeah.
For me, it's a reminder that all over the world, it's real people are living real lives with challenges and skills.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mahmoud left his chair. I don't know if he was going to bring something to show us or he had to leave for other reasons.
Yep. Mahmoud, are you there?
Okay. All right. So what we're going to be reviewing today and talking about is what has happened since we did our storytelling session. And I have to go back to this mode. So I wonder who has used any of the storytelling things that we discussed and worked on since the last training. Has anyone used storytelling in their work? Karen.
Well, we used it for Golden Rule Day because we reached out to young ladies that their young girl ambassadors were training for the Girls on Brides and got them to tell their stories. And that some of those are recorded. Some of them are still not released though. But we used that opportunity to tell a story and how the Golden Rules impacted them. So that was one way we used it.
That's great. Great. Thank you.
This hasn't happened yet, but I'm planning a call for next week on youth leadership, and we decided to start, each of the panelists would start with a story, and we also talked about how to integrate stories throughout each presentation or sharing.
Okay. Do you want to start capturing notes, Alice, or are you going to capture some of the notes?
Yeah. So Linda, I'm very happy to, but I won't be able to type on that sticky. So what I can do is just type into a Word document. But that sticky is on your computer.
I got you.
So I can't access.
Here's what I have to do. I have to send it to you.
Okay.
In the chat.
Because is it a Google Doc?
It is.
Okay, good. So then I think, yes, if you send it to me, then I ought to be able to open it up and then share my screen and then type on it.
Okay, good. Let me figure out how I'm doing that.
Love technology.
Yes, I'm learning about all this technology.
I've made Alice a co-host so that she can share.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
And Linda, you'll have to stop sharing yours.
Okay. There you go, Alice.
All righty.
And then you can share.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony, for helping us with that.
So it looks like I need permission. That's the only thing.
Oh, shoot. Why is that? Let me share again.
No, so in the document you have to. Oh, here, I'll ask for access. That'll help maybe.
Yeah, okay. Sorry for that. Next time I'll know to do this all ahead of time.
It's all right. We're learning and it's a friendly group.
Yes.
Barry and Karen. What happened to Beach for Dead? Is he still here?
No. He's dropped off. He'll probably come back in.
There he is. Hey, Beach for Dead.
Hi. You shared it?
Oh. Alice. A sweat.
This is a little experiment. Beach for Deb and Sari, can you see the group chat right now on my screen or not? I just put it in front of the screen. I'm curious if you see it.
No, you can't. You can't see someone's Zoom controls even when they're sharing their screen.
Okay, Alice, I sent it to you in your email. So it should share. Hopefully.
Yep.
Great.
And y'all see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good. So here,
Okay.
I think I'll be able to type. Excellent. Sari, what did you say?
You can't see, so anything that is a part of Zoom on your screen, we cannot see.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, she meant what you said about how you're going to use storytelling in your next meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so we are having a webinar on youth leadership, and we decided that each person will start with a story, and that we'll use stories as much throughout their presentation as they can.
Wonderful. That's great. All right. This one, Deb, have you had an opportunity to do storytelling?
Yes, we did in the last festival of color called Holi. And in the Holi festival, we engaged little children. And, we used about
Oh, you're frozen. We lost.
If you can hear us, will you cut your video and see if that helps?
Are you talking to me, Alice?
Yeah, we could not hear you. We lost you. And I was saying, could you cut your video in case that helps?
Yeah. Okay. So we used a storytelling session with the children on the day of Holi Festival of Color, the Holi. And their children were asked, to share how they feel about coloring. They're so joyful. They like the festival. And because these days it's very popular, becoming more popular across the people of different religions and faith. It's becoming the festival of color, of expressing love and unity. So we wanted to take this opportunity to engage children to share how they played the color in their community. And even though our intention was truly engaging children, parents, in the interfaith cross connections to promote interfaith cooperation, because the Holi Festival has a long history of being Radha Krishna Hindu festival. Mm-hmm. And so many festivals are now there saying Hindu festival, but in generally it's becoming more popular among the people. So there's a lot to share to a particular Hindu community, and that how these festivals is attracting, how beautiful to share love and unity. So the children were so good expressing, and they had the color in their hand, Everybody loves, some love yellow, red, and we ask them why they like the color. Somebody says it looks like the sun. Most of them are very connecting about the nature. That was very interesting.
That's
Many
great.
children says the color was like for tree leaves color. And nobody said like color like any religious thing. So that was very beautiful. That children were connecting to the nature through this storytelling.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Mahmood, did you get a chance to use storytelling in your work this past month?
Sorry?
Did you get a chance to use storytelling in your work this past month, or plan to?
Yeah, yes and no, but we had what we call exactly, yeah, to promote peace. We just try to use sport and street campaign, for example. That's the main focal that we use to promote peace. And everybody's welcome, children, old, women, man. Now we try to put all the community together.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Mahmoud, as part of that, do you have people tell stories at all?
Stories is most of the time you find those who are in the culture, who are, for example, playing sketches, and when you go to the, how do you call it, the artists, when they are doing a drawing, and there is a young artist who do the drawing, and then you see how we try to ask them to draw something for peace, for example, and making drawing, speaking about peace or dialogue between the community. And that's most of the time using with I was in Addis last time, and I had the chance to meet a young organization which is African Peace Artists. So they use the arts to promote peace, for example.
And then art is a way to help people tell a story in a visual way, or maybe
exactly,
using words.
Like singing, drawing, and playing with the children, or putting them something like, yeah, it's using the art for the purpose of peace, for example.
Wonderful. I love how many youth and children are involved in what we're talking about today. And Alice, have you had an opportunity to use stories?
Yeah, there was a meeting that was to address a challenging question that was people who knew each other, and some more connected, some less connected. And so I started the meeting by putting people in pairs and asked them to tell a story about when they had dealt with something challenging and what they had done to help them do that. And then to have the other person share back. And then when we came back to the whole, to have people just say, what was the thing that helped them address the challenge? And it was, not everybody followed the instructions totally, and nonetheless, it was successful because it kind of helped people get their heads into what we were doing, and it helped people feel connected in the pairs, which made for a participatory discussion, I think.
That's great.
So I was really glad to have you had, I think you had used that almost specific example in the training, which was helpful to me because I had been thinking, I don't really know how, in my job, I'm not sure when I'll have the opportunity to use story. And then there it was. So that was great.
Yeah. Okay, I took a few notes in the chat.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Add to it.
Yep.
That's a really great way to use story too, and I think an important example of the different ways storytelling can be used. Any challenges or questions about storytelling? Karen. And we can move to the next page of the.
Okay.
I think the one, not really a challenge so much, Linda, but what really stuck with me was that opening line. You know, having that one line that captures. So I've been really thinking a lot about that, working with that, trying to share it. I shared it also in our staff meeting. And what is it that, you know, in that first line that then captures the attention for someone to listen to the story and really hear the story.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, share that.
I also think what I wish more could have happened, that we use a lot of stories in value-based, you know, but I like the other day when in a group discussions, Alice shared that how one person can really, even a little initiative can make a call for action. So I find it would be very useful during the storytelling. I always try to find a way how the story can be concluded with a call to action. Because, you know, even sharing a story is great energy, but then how do we harness the energy to go forward the future so it can be a greater action people feel to take on to. This is what my interest to learn more, how in every story you use that we can, you know, inspire people for call.
Inspire people to action, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important point. And so, you know, at the end of stories that I tell, depending on what group I'm in and how it's being used, but very often I always include an action step at the end of it. And I think that's really important to give as much concrete action opportunities. And sometimes that's as getting the group to make a commitment. You know, after I do trainings, I'm asking y'all to make a commitment to something in the training. In stories, I do sort of the same thing where I ask people to think of an action step out of the stories we've told or the examples we've used. And out of that to come up with some action that they want to do. And then I always get people to share it. Sometimes in this last retreat I did, I asked people to write a letter to themselves and took all the letters and I had them, they had an envelope, they put their letter in it, addressed it to themselves, and I told them to write on the back of the envelope 6 months or 1 year when they wanted to receive this letter of commitment they had made to themselves. So there's a lot of ways that you can begin to use this. And when we know when people speak an action step or a commitment they're making, if they speak it or write it down, it's going to be much more effective. So from a trainer's perspective, it's always really important to end with that action step, but getting them to say it, and if you don't have time, they can say it to each other in pairs or write a short thing and send it. So that's why I always do that. I do that with in every way. In fundraising, the commitment might be asking them to give money for it. And that's how I often use stories in my fundraising, because you know, I'm never asking for money for salaries or office supplies or expenses. I'm asking them to join in the excitement of the work. And that's the only way to do that is to tell the stories and get them to, they'll much more likely give to that. And it also helps folks you're teaching to do fundraising, because nobody wants to ask for their own salary, and that's not exciting to donors. You're asking for what it is, the kind of work you do. You know, what's the exciting thing that you're making, that you're helping coordinate to happen. And that's what people are giving to, not because they want you to have a job, unless it's your parents or somebody. But they're really not about paying your salary. They're about making the work that you're able to help coordinate and facilitate happen. So I really appreciate the idea that it's an action step, ending with a concrete action step. I think that's really important. Any other thoughts about storytelling or questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
Oh, but Karen, I see you. Karen, you go first.
You're on mute. Karen, you're on mute. I don't think she hears me. Oh, there.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Alice. I think something that we've used effectively has been in our zonal and regional assemblies, using storytelling as a way to do reports instead of, the usual report, which can be a bit boring, where the story is way more exciting. Well, not boring, but you don't have the same attention. And out of all of those stories, we then come up with what the main issues are, where the wins have been and the challenges, and then out of that the resolutions are created. And currently we're working on resolutions that were made. It's been a really powerful tool for us to use in terms of developing our action plans and our budget. So it's not just about telling a story, it really underpins the work that we do in a very cohesive manner. So
that's really powerful. And it's a way grassroots folks who are your members can have a really visible role in helping create the direction of the organization and the focus of what's happening coming out of those stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. When we go out into low-income communities talking to people for the first time, we actually ask them to tell a story of their community, what they like about it, and what they would like to improve. And out of that, we begin to talk to them about what is the things we can work on together. And so that's another powerful way of using it for organizing.
Karen, do you notice that the stories help to identify needs or to identify skills or like assets, or both?
We get a whole range of that. So because we really do pull a lot out of the stories. Yeah, the resources do come out. It's not the reason for the story, but either the access to resource or lack of resource does come out of the story. The need for the development or the skill absolutely also can come out of the story. And but for us, it's really pulling, when hearing all the stories, we ask and say, what are the common threads that we're hearing from each other? And then and we don't typify and say, which common thread around an issue. We leave it open, and then out of that, the group, the CC leaders come together with sharing what they've recognized as a common point, and then from there, something gets developed around that.
Mm-hmm. Great. And how do you frame the question for people to tell stories? How do you ask them? What's the question you ask to get them to tell?
Well, I don't know right now because, just off the top of my head, but generally speaking, it's when we encourage the CC leaders to, when they attend the regional assembly, to come prepared. To share the story of what's been happening within their cooperation circle. What are the highlights? What are the lowlights? Where have they struggled? That kind of. So we try and give it a bit of a broad stroke around giving them the option to share. So not just a sad story of something terrible, and not just the wow story to make us happy, but rather to give us the real picture of what's happening on the ground.
That's good. I like that you asked what are the highlights and what are the lowlights. I think that's useful way to ask that question.
I was curious if anybody has experienced resistance to telling stories.
People being resistant.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like not wanting to do it or not, or feeling like it's a distraction from why they're there, or any kind of resistance.
I'm going to do that. Okay,
You
go.
mean resistance from? Sorry, Alice, can you repeat it? It's resistance from.
Resistance from the participants. So people not
Okay.
wanting to participate in the storytelling.
Sari and then Karen.
Yeah, I don't have a specific example of that happening, but I can imagine that happening very easily. It particularly in our North American context, where we're so focused on sort of results or other things that people might feel it's frivolous. So I could imagine easily that happening, but I don't have a specific example.
Karen.
So this is Africa. We tell stories. It's there's just definitely not even. It's actually the easiest vehicle for sharing information of all kinds. So it really is helpful for us.
I find more resistance in more middle upper class, formally educated folks in this country. I've found that a lot. In other countries where I've gone to indigenous folks, like in Central America, Mexico, I find they, like low-income people, just tell stories. It's just part of the culture and part of the way that we do things. So I grew up telling stories as part of my culture. And I used to have folks, mostly organizers from up north that were more middle class that came down here to work with us. They'd go, oh, all you Southerners just tell stories. But when I looked at who we were working with, it was mostly low-income Southerners and very multiracial. And they were like, oh, all y'all do is tell stories. And they almost did it as if it was a joke or a criticism in some way. And it took me a while to learn that that was a real value, not something to be ashamed of. So, yeah. So I think the resistance comes to, you know, I also find that in more highly educated, formally educated, I should say, groups, that they often want to be much more, have an analysis of things, when stories in fact do analysis, but they want to see it worded in that way. So I find that interesting. So I think there are cultural differences in people's storytelling, but the people who have learned to do it, it turns out if you can ask the questions in the right way, it's very life-changing for people who have not been used to telling stories. It's a very life-changing experience because many of them haven't done it before or done it in the way that we do it. They find it, they might be resistant at first, but as they get into it, people find it very opening, heart-opening for themselves. And I've seen a lot of change happen for folks who learn how to tell stories. And sometimes it means asking the questions in the right way so they can.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So I find the same, Linda. We use storytelling, but we really do see people are good at it, and we do frame it, create the atmospheres, you know, of participants. Many times we see participants who are not good and question was not asked in the right way. They had a bad experience of the storytelling session. So it's rather than resistance, there has been a lot of mixed feelings of people. So we do moderate, facilitate in a way, categorize the story for, you know, inspirational story that really speaks the values of human love, you know, commitment, organizational commitment. So the various category we use, I find it very useful, but you're right. If we are very careful of asking the questions in the right way, it's really very motivating.
There's a good resource. I'm going to grab it out of my bookcase. That Appreciative Inquiry has David Cooperrider, Diana Whitney, and Amanda Troston-Bloom. It's called the Encyclopedia of Positive Questions. You're seeing it backwards, aren't you? But the Encyclopedia of Positive Questions use an appreciative inquiry to bring out the best in your organization. I use it more for helping think about wording questions, and they have them under all different topics from community service to cooperation, participatory decision making. It's a really good resource, and if you have trouble with questions, I recommend it.
Who wrote it, Linda?
What's that?
Who wrote it?
Diana Whitney and David Cooperrider, and Amanda Troston-Bloom.
And David Cooperrider was one of the people who helped shape the structure of URI.
Yeah. Oh, was he? Okay.
And those two other ladies are names that I've heard Sally speak about.
Yeah, they're very.
As part of the founding of URI, yeah. I think they were involved in designing the Appreciative Inquiry Summits.
Yes. Yes.
What's Amanda's last name? What Bloom?
Amanda Troston-Bloom. And I'm going to put in the chat here a link to it on Amazon. So if anybody wants to search it out, that's one. And I just find it full of good questions that help lead to storytelling. And that are related to work, you know, because in Appreciative Inquiry, they ask people to tell stories.
Great.
Good. Other thoughts or questions? Do you have any thoughts, Mahmoud?
Mahmoud, I muted you. Wait, let me unmute you. There you go. You're good, Mahmoud.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
No, I'm good. I'm just listening to find the solutions for my problems also.
Yeah. Do you have any specific questions that would help you if we answered them?
No, I was listening that what Karen was saying, that the stories is very useful in Africa. But it depends what kind of story that you're asking the people. They will always reticence that the people, is the things that the people don't want to say, and it depends which country that you are in Africa. But in majority, storytelling is what we call it oral. And writing is much less than what we're saying in oral. So it's that way it's okay. That way the stories are there, but you have to see where you are in Africa, and it depends which regime there is on the country ruling. So it's
Mahmoud,
yeah.
When you do gatherings of young people and CC leaders, do you use storytelling then, or can you imagine doing that? For example, when you do it sometimes with government officials and with leaders of different sectors, can you imagine using storytelling then?
It depends. When there is a government officials, it may be people may not be really how do you call it, more speaking. They will always filter what they're saying. But when we are not officials and we are together like CCs, we most of the time talk everything and anything. So we just see how they did their programs, what kind of things that they do with the community and how they did, what kind of story they have. And it's more fluid, it's more, you have more stories when there is official, government official with it in the room. Let's say like that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it depends which country you are in Africa. I don't know, in South Africa, it's more free than the other countries, maybe.
Mhm.
In Djibouti, do people tell stories a lot or not so much?
It depends. Sometimes they can tell, sometimes no. It depends what kind of subject that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or thoughts about how you could use story? Oh, hold on. Yes. Sorry, a dog emergency. Any other thoughts about or questions about how you could use storytelling? Or examples people have?
I guess I have one other question, like Karen or anybody. I'm curious what are the other, are there challenges with storytelling? Like I imagine that maybe somebody could go on for too long and take up too much time, right? So does that happen, and how do you deal with that? Okay. Yeah.
Can I share? So I wish Despina was on this call because I think she would have fallen over the chair laughing by now. Because we do have our elders talking, and when our elders speak, we have to listen. We have to sit still. We have to listen and pay attention. And they can go on. They like the sound of their own voices, and of course they come with their wisdom. And then we also have pastors. Evangelical pastors are are perfectionists at this. They can go on, like when you ask a question or tell us a story about whatever. So there is that challenge, and it's uncommon and impolite to put a time limit in that on people. So I come in with my very European thinking and, right, we've got 10 minutes, share a story. And that's just not the way it works. And I've learned over the years to soften that approach and just sit and be open, let the time roll, let what needs to flow. And I find in that way so much more comes up. It's much deeper and it's much richer. And the one that's rambling rambles, and then the next person doesn't. And so it's fine. And I think it's actually a very cultural thing, storytelling. So one has to, for me, I've learned that I've got to work within the cultural dynamic of the group that I'm in. And so it'll be very different if I'm with a group of my white friends, as you say, some of them may be upper middle class. They won't share the same kind of story. It'll be very different. But when I'm sitting within traditional healers or in traditional communities, culturally based communities, then yeah, very much it's different and the stories are longer. But you kind of go into a little bit of a dream state and you go on a journey with the story. So there's a magic in it that we don't want to lose. And so we work with that very much rather than putting on a limit and so on, which is a very Western or European concept. It's not typically what storytelling is. Storytelling can carry on until the sun rises, and that's okay.
Yeah. Karen, I think that's a really important point. In certain groups, I'm really structured about time. And in trainings, I have to be structured about time. And so I'll give people time, and depending on the group, I might even ring a bell so they'll know that they have to cut off soon. But with elders and certain cultures, I think that you describe it as the dream state, I think is really important. And then I think you have to make sure that the group is prepared to stay. What I find in indigenous communities and communities where that kind of storytelling goes on is they're also willing to hang out. They're not structured by a time limit of, I'm going to end this meeting in exactly 1 hour or 2 hours. That they are willing to sit there and go when it's that juicy but I think, and then there's the European meetings that you speak of, that the white man will stand up, the privileged white man, and take all the time. And I think in those situations, we need to be able to have a way of cutting them off. Just ways to think about that is to look at them and then say thank you, and deliberately look at the next person or to someone else, look away from them. That's a trainer's technique, is if someone's going on and on that shouldn't be going on and on, if you can look away from them and try to distract the other, if they're keyed into their emotional intelligence, they'll catch that and start to cut off. Of course, they don't always do that, and then sometimes you just have to say thank you, and Sari, will you go? So that's another way to do it. But I think it really is important. You know, I went to do a training for an environmental group, the Pacific Asian Environmental Group, Asian Pacific Environmental Group, in Oakland. And I found that the elders talked a long time, but at the same time, it was really important to listen and be present with that and to learn from that. So there's both and in that. So were you thinking of a specific example, Alice, in your situation? No. Okay.
No, I was just kind of troubleshooting in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest when it's the people with privilege and power that are doing that. Mm-hmm. We had a sort of big issue with this at our North America assembly, but it wasn't directly related to storytelling, so I don't know if it's relevant to bring up now, but we just had people basically go on advertisements for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Advertising other events or?
Advertising like themselves, basically, like their philosophy or the way that their group does something, or their group. Mm-hmm. Almost like proselytizing, but for themselves or their idea or their book or their way of viewing the world. They would just kind of,
yes,
go on diatribes. And I've heard from other regional coordinators in other parts of the world that that's not uncommon. And I find it one of the challenges with being a membership network, right? Because everyone's coming from their own place, like from their own organization. And one of the reasons they join URI, they often tell us, is for increased visibility of that organization. So what happens when you then have 100 of the same people in a room who are all looking for increased visibility of their organization as something to get from URI, it can just end up turning into one big advertisement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that. That's a challenge. I was trying to problem solve that in my mind, and I could imagine asking people to bring or to create a poster that you're going to put around the wall that kind of is an advertisement of their organization and what it does. That might be a way to get people to not talk quite as much, to say we don't have time to really hear all the wonderful things about your organization, so bring materials or make a poster or something. I just wonder if other people have dealt with that in any way.
And we had a table at this particular event where people could put things, but they didn't. I think there was like almost an anxiety there that you were managing of people. You had a short time and they wanted everyone to hear it, and they didn't know that everyone was going to go look at their stuff on the table.
Yeah, sure. So they had to advertise what they brought. Yeah, I've seen that. It's a challenge. Does anyone else have that challenge? Karen?
I just think what I've been hearing from Siri and from you is that it wasn't a storytelling, it's more like opinions.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very interesting thing to articulate what is a story about a situation and what is an opinion or a sales pitch. I think they're really quite different.
Yes, they are.
I agree. And I hesitated to bring it up because I don't think it is storytelling, but it is related to what happens when people go on and on.
Yes. Thank you, Karen.
It's also like India, the also in India, yeah. Can you hear me?
Can you turn your camera off because the audio quality is not good? I'm having trouble.
Sorry, I take responsibility. I asked Bishwadeb to turn his camera back on so we could see him, but I think that if we're going to hear from you, Bishwadeb, I guess you have to keep it off. So.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited about, storytelling, and all of your sharing is really enriching me a lot. Recently, we're working for the longest time with the tribal community in India. And what is we're facing about, like we're talking about the development the other day. For a tribal community, because in URI it says we engage people from different traditions. So tribal is not a religion, it's more of a tradition. And in the tribal traditions, they are, the community believe in going back to the time, to connecting with the ancient wisdom, while the scenario of the total national, consciousness is really going forward. And this is being a big conflict right now, working with the tribal communities along with the modern communities. So, Linda, as you're saying, the tribal community, their time frame does not work accordingly, as right now. But when we work, we need to work precisely at a time. And a celebration is a very big part of the tribal community. Right. And celebration means there should not be restricted time. Mm-hmm. So the recent challenges we're facing in different communities are about the socio and political cultural challenges and beliefs. There is a consciousness of a local consciousness, and there's a national consciousness, and then there's an international consciousness. So like an international consciousness are very different because it's a globalization, and then local concept, the tribal communities are very different than the two, and it always conflict. So I find using appreciative inquiry as very helpful. Other people, the discovery part was very important and helpful to us. So we feel like, where are we standing? And when people open up, with their really values, they really share stories that really can give us a direction of designing what they share their dream. Mm-hmm. So truly, I'm finding little difficulties just opening up any stories right away in a mixed, participants conference or gathering. Sometimes it's very time consuming and sometimes very conflicting. Mm-hmm. So in our region, we are very careful of how we engage the storytelling, unless or until it is really good strategies and good, way of asking, framing it. It's always turned to be very difficult, time consuming, and conflicting.
Bishwadeb, I think I kind of hear you saying too, like, if you don't have the time to do it well, it can actually be harmful because people don't feel heard or respected.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. What are some ways that you think you could do that in a way? How could you do it differently that would deal with some of the time-consuming pieces.
For us, we're now really doing more cluster meetings where we really engage. Like in the past, we used to do very cross geographical meeting, like a CC from tribal issues are working with the CCs from, say, with another issues, and using storytelling in that setup was not really working. So now we kind of group them into common shared goals and purpose. So then it's really worked very well.
Okay. So when you say you group them, are you actually putting people into different groups to tell stories, or you're just doing it a different way than telling stories?
No, we put groups that are, so some people are interested to really working with the environment. So really using
smaller
stories
group.
that can,
Yeah.
group.
Great. Yeah, I think one way that I do it, because I think having the time to do stories is really important, is break them into smaller groups to tell their stories. And then if there are themes that come out of that, sharing that is another way, another thing to think about. So, Karen.
Linda?
Yes.
One thing that we've done with our storytelling that helps a little bit to manage time without being talking time is that we leave the storytelling we have an early supper. So we break for supper at 5:30, 6 p.m. and then we have dinner. So for example, when we're gathering, and then people have their dinner and have a little bit of a break, and then we come back and we've either built a fire and we sit circle, and then we start to share our story. So it becomes a part of the evening. So if people, they come and share their stories. So they begin to realize that if they have long stories, they can't go to bed or go off on their own or do their own thing. But if they share their stories promptly, and for those who want to sit around and share longer stories, they can. So we bleed it into the evening. So it becomes a little bit of their time. So they're hearing the stories, but then there's also that sense of, well, I want to go to bed, so let me get my story done. And so it's not a forced time, but rather it's an encouraged one just around time, around that. If they want to go off and have a beer or something, then they better get the stories done, because no beer drinking, storytelling's done. Yeah. So it's a way of just managing it. They're adults, and so you don't want to kind of sit there like a school teacher and go, you only got 5 minutes, you better tell your story. I mean, that's like so parental. So we try not to do that, because we obviously want to encourage the connection between them also as as friends and family of your eyes. So we try to build the relationship in that way.
Yes, I think that's brilliant.
Thank you.
And we often do this in groups as an evening event of the storytelling, and it's so much more powerful, I think, to do it that way. So thank you for bringing that up. Alice, you had your hand up?
No, I was affirming what Karen was saying.
Okay.
Putting my thumb up.
Yeah, gotcha.
Thanks.
No, and it's such a much more cultural event at that point, I love doing it that way. I think that's great.
And people don't feel forced to be there or forced to listen. Like, people are there because they want to be there.
Yeah.
The trick can just be, I think, to figure out how that fits into the flow of the whole thing. So Karen, if you're using storytelling to get information that leads toward resolutions, and everybody's together just for 2 nights, it could be that you don't want to do the storytelling on the first night because maybe people aren't comfortable enough with each other yet. I'm not sure. But if you do it on the second night, it only gives you the next day. So I just think it's something to always have to figure out how it fits into the agenda.
Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate that most of our CC leaders know each other, so it's a beautiful way to introduce us, and we there can also be we also ask them to use drama. so they can act out some of the stuff as well. So there's really, it becomes a bit entertaining, not just fun entertainment, but also serious entertainment, if you like. And so it's a way of people getting to know each other. So no, we do it from day one.
That's great. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Really good. Other thoughts or questions about storytelling? Let's see. Does anyone have a story they want to tell that they'd like us to talk about? Would you like me to tell a story, one of my stepping stones, for y'all to talk about? Or would you like to end early? I'll take a poll.
Sari, were you going to say something?
No,
Oh, sorry. I thought I saw you.
that's okay. I did move, but I did not to raise my hand. Gotta be careful around here how you move.
You have a big, beautiful smile, so. Yes, Karen.
One of the things that has happened to us with storytelling is that things like sexism or racism or xenophobia, those things come out in the stories.
Yes.
And it does give us a little bit of the next day to talk about when they reflect on the stories. Then we can say, how was the evening, and what did you find, most interesting, or whatever the question is around the stories. And then one of the things we can say, we picked up the theme of sexism. Did anyone else? And what is sexism? And quite often there's an ignorance around things. For example, someone doesn't know they're sexist. I don't know I'm so picky. So, and then we bring that into the school and we say, did you notice that? And someone will say, yes, I did. And let's share. And then, but there also has to be that very gentle understanding of not pointing fingers at anyone. Say, well, I'm sure you didn't know. Did you realize that sound comes across to someone else? And they would be, no, they aren't. And then they learn something. So it really is a beautiful, a beautiful platform for so much learning in so many ways. And we milk it, quite frankly.
Yes, I think that's such a powerful piece that I've seen happen in storytelling. I think that's really powerful example, Karen, of how, and I do think it's important to address it the next day as you have. I think that's really a strong thing, and the way that you address it gently, I think is the most effective way, that we're coming from a place of love and heart and assuming that people didn't need something bad. So I think that's really powerful. So
Yeah, it can come across much more subtly, like in the course of conversation, other conversations than a conversation about racism, where people would say, oh no, I'm not that.
Yeah.
We had kind of an interesting situation at our assembly where on the last day we were saying, okay, what were the themes that everyone heard, whether you agreed with it or not, but you heard it as a theme. And somebody said that there is an us and a them. So they heard that as a theme. And everyone reacted so strongly against it that they wouldn't let it, like we were writing them all down. And then we were saying how many people heard that. They would not let us write it down, because every time we had to write it down, somebody would go, no, that's not. And I'm like, but this is what this person heard. Anyway, just a way that we would never say it, right? Because it's contrary to our values, but this person heard it as a subtlety coming out through the conversations that they had.
Did you ever get to ask if other people heard that?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I think that, people assumed that this person was trying to say the opposite of what she was trying to say. So I don't actually remember how it shook out.
Yeah.
I just remember people having such a strong reaction.
Yeah.
which was frustrating to me because I really wanted to have that conversation.
Yeah. It's hard when someone says what they're experiencing and then people try to shut down their experience,
Right.
which in itself is creating an us and them. Yeah. This or that.
I just have questions, and you don't have to answer now. But any of you, if you have used any storytelling sessions about
Please put up your camera.
more into
Turn it
kind
up.
of. Oh, thank you. I was wondering, and my question you don't have to answer now, but maybe this is very interesting. You can answer me by email. And Linda, if any of you have used the storytelling, kind of facilitating a rational arguments, so more like going beyond like storytelling sessions using to learning things, I would be very interested to see if anybody uses that. Most of the time I find the stories are used really creating visions, values, really rewarding the human emotions, the connections. But, there is a situations like I'm working with Bangladesh, and there's a lot of situations that really, I was thinking if there is any stories that can be used, storytelling. I'm kind of not ready yet, but this is the questions about engaging more rational arguments or not doing rational arguments, Like how do you break down so many beliefs of 100 years, and that's kind of big challenges. How do you use stories, to break through that,
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting, and I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean by the rational argument.
I think, most of us working with interfaith cooperation, and many times so many kind of blindly believing in faith in some of the prejudice and practices. I don't say the whole religion, but practices are very difficult in terms of the human, the development of humanity, connections, and even we use as a story to really create greater visions, creating really hopes. That's one way, but it's also getting people to know and let them ask the questions. Am I doing the right things? That's the story. But every time we try to engage the story, it becomes very highly debating things. People are so protective about, what they believe. So it's kind of a story I call story to unlearn things. If there's any story that you, yeah. You don't have to answer now, but it's just if my question make clear, else I can share it later on with email. But this is just
great.
in mind. So before I forget, I just shared with you.
I'm just thinking that when I brought people together that had very different theories of how change happens and different beliefs about, to the point that they were almost enemies of each other, even though they all cared about social justice. And I'm just wondering if that's any similar kind of thing where we really ask people as the opening of that meeting to bring something that symbolized why they did this work. And for some people, they were bringing prayer rugs and Christian symbols and different symbols of spirituality. And other people were bringing things like a newspaper article of union busting that her dad was involved in when she was young. And people shared these really deep beliefs and stories in a place that was sort of equitable. But we also made sure that they had lots of personal time. We made it almost 50% of meeting time versus time that they had to share to prepare meals together. So not only had they told their story, but they then had to work together to fix the meals and stuff. and it was unbelievable what happened within 24 hours of connecting them. I don't know if that would be the same thing around the variety of religious things, but what they begin to see, I felt, was a lot of commonality. And we did visioning after that too, I should say, that the visioning, they realized they all wanted the same thing, even if they were coming at it from really different directions. So I don't know if that would work. I mean, I think it'd be really interesting. And I will think about it more and send you an email and CC others about what that might look like. So, yeah. Alice.
Two things. One is I just want everybody to know I stopped taking notes because I can no longer type on the slides. I think we ran out of slides. So
Did you scoot down to the next slide or?
Yeah, I can't.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't want to take the time to try to figure it out, but I can't.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Mm-hmm.
But Bishra, what your comment makes me think something that's a little bit different, but that's related. When you talk about unlearning something, it makes me think how there can be an opportunity sometimes to debrief a story. Like, so, yeah. But that's a different thing than story as like icebreaker, or it's story as teaching tool versus story as way to get to know each other, or story to bring everybody on the same page to begin a meeting, or other, it's a different use of story. And like I'm not quite sure, I can't right now imagine how one could use that except with, like, I used to run a youth leadership program, and there it would be easy because I could say, you know, here we're going to do a story as a way to explore an issue. So here's a story, and now let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. But that's, I don't think of RCs necessarily being in that role, but you could be doing a training, for example, and use story as teaching tool in that way. So I'm not totally sure actually about that, but that's what it made me think of. Because then you could say, like, well, what happened in this story, and is that something that that we want to learn to do or learn not to do, or what's the benefit of doing it, or what's the cost of doing it, that kind of thing. What are the drawbacks of doing it?
Great idea.
But that's a different way of using story, right? Mm-hmm. It's not as participatory in a way. It's not about everybody telling a story. But I can also imagine that if it is something where everybody's telling a story, there could be stories that it would be good to debrief, or like part of what Karen was saying about, if a story raises a particular issue and you want to point that out and invite people to consider that together. So that's just an interesting thing. I'm imagining if I was running a group and some stories seem to be good ones to debrief and others not so much. Mm-hmm. Just something to be aware of, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly going to think about that question. It'd be great to hear from anyone if they come up with thoughts about that. I know we've used stories in that way. I can't think of an example right away, but something we could do more work on.
Mm-hmm. I like Alice's example. I'm intrigued by that.
I do too. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay.
Linda, I heard you ask earlier about ending early, and if my opinion is if people want to do that, that's fine. I also just wonder if any of the URCs on the call would want to use this as a time to share one story about what's been going on in your work lately.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
That would feel good to you.
Are we talking like well-refined story or just kind of like here's what's going on?
No, what I was thinking, I mean, whatever you would want, but I was thinking kind of here's what's going, like here's something interesting that's happened. Not so much a well-refined story, but as I think of each of your work, I can imagine a question that I can imagine a story that I would like you to tell because I'd like to learn about something that you've been working on. But that's what I was thinking. Sort of like, yeah, here's one thing that's been interesting about my work of late.
Mm-hmm. Can we use that as kind of a closing go round?
Yeah.
Fabulous, Alice. Thank you. You want to ask it again? Yeah,
sure. Let's see. So what's something that you've been working on lately that is interesting, that makes for a good story? So interesting, moved you in some way.
Who'd like to start?
And I can say, so specifically, Mahamud, I'm thinking of you, and I'm thinking about what you streamed on Facebook a week ago. So for example, is there a story you can tell about that, Mahamud? Like, not necessarily, yeah, is there a piece of that you can share that was interesting, that made you feel good? And you're on mute, Mahamud, so I will unmute you, make it easier. There, now you're good now, it's okay.
Yeah, can you repeat what you're saying?
Yes, I'm asking you to tell a story about some part of your work that has been interesting lately. And in your case, you streamed something on Facebook a week ago. And there might be a part of that which is an interesting story that you could tell.
You mean the live when there was the TED Talk?
For example, if you think that would be interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting because it was the first time let's say, because it was a long day, 4 hours live. What was interesting was, first of all, a politician in front of a people, what youth or not youth, who was asking questions openly. And then the all global or Djiboutian or Somalian who was around the world was watching that program on that day specifically, and was asking the question also via Facebook Live. That was one of the things that we tried on the first time. We didn't know what kind of thing will come out, and we don't know how it will be. But we see that the people was really good with it, and the questions were good. And the good things was that the politician who came there was open and know how to. But sometimes they get crazy and they just stop everything. So it was our fear, by the way. How are you going to control, to do the things go well, and that everybody feel happy with it? Whether those who asking question or the one who is answering the question. But it went good, and we think we were going to renew that kind of debate, consultation. We call it debate, and then we put the word of consultation so that we give them more. That is not just debate, but it's also consultation, having suggestions and all that sort of things. Because
and
if you say
the topic?
The topic was interpotentiality and how do you call it, DEFI? I don't know in English how do you call that.
So challenges and possibilities.
Possibility, entrepreneurship in Djibouti. So it was to see how the Djibouti economy allows entrepreneurship.
And there were young people and adults in the audience.
Yeah, there was economist, professor economist, entrepreneur specialist, the young entrepreneur, the university students of what they call it, filière of entrepreneurship or business management. We bring that kind of people together.
And you might do it again because it went well enough that you think you might do it a similar thing again.
Yeah, we call it we call it that Dere Talk. It's the same format of TED.
The TED
just
Talk.
Just same format, but with a local name. So it's we didn't use TED. We used also only Djibouti reflection and extend space. That is what we call it. And we're thinking to do it like what we call talk. We will do it for a year, which is every 3 months. And then next to that, we have what we call it the Dere Conference, which is 2 days conference, and it's annual.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Beautiful. Anyone else like to tell a closing thing about work they're doing?
I'm debating between telling like a happy story and a tougher story. This isn't so much of a story, but so we have 2 interns who, or a couple of interns who help us with our various communications activities, actually a lot of storytelling. And these are unpaid internships that they have, and we're giving them experience, but we're not in mentorship and things to add to their resume and portfolio, but not money. And so a couple of weeks ago, one of our 3 interns told me that she had been offered a paid opportunity, and so she was no longer going to be continuing her internship. And then on Sunday, my second of 3 interns told me that they were, their paid work, which had been part-time, was moving up to full-time, and they were going to be stopping the internship. Then yesterday I had a conversation with our 3rd intern, and she's had a lot of stuff going on in her family. And she really wants to continue, but she needs a break. So, which is something that it's feasible, and she's been an intern with us for 9 months, and I've told her to take breaks before, but she hasn't like taken a day off. So that's really feasible, but it was just like, okay, this is hard.
Yeah.
That's when you want to respond saying, no, I'm sorry, that's not okay. You'll just have to work through whatever is going on.
So it just has been making me think about, I mean, even if you have paid staff, they leave, and things come up and they have family emergencies and all of that, but just, has me thinking about the structure of how we use it, the interns, and
My experience, the best way of having interns is when it's a college credit. I get summer interns that they work all summer and they get credit for a class, and then I have other interns that work during the year and get credit.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't. We can talk about this later, but I haven't done that so much because, especially with an unpaid internship, they have to pay for college credit, and then I'm not paying them any money, so it's like they're paying to give me free labor. So I offer it if people want it, but I've never had somebody ask for it.
Yeah. Well, they usually like getting this kind of field. Well, the ones I do need field experience. So, yeah. Karen, any closing thoughts or?
I think in terms of what's going on as RC in the area, I think it's a challenge for me to keep the balance between one of the countries in Malawi where the need is so great for so much of the work that we do, and yet working within South Africa, where, not to say all the CCs are hugely resourced at all, but they certainly have more access to resource and opportunity and so on. And I find that myself and even as the team, we have to really ensure that we that we give equal attention to all of the CCs and that we don't end up creating a divide, and that we continue to build the bridge. And so one thing that we've started and has been super successful so far, and we're really enjoying it, is putting together the CC Zoom calls. And what we found is working really well is that we invite an RC from another region or someone else from URI to pop in on the call. And what happens is they just get so excited to meet someone else from another region or to hear what's going on, and even for that person to, experience some of the CC leaders or community that come on the call, because it's open to everyone. And those are going really well. So it's helping us to really do what URI says it does, which is to build those bridges and the collaboration. And although it's just started, and although it's a struggle for some people, it really is difficult. We had one guy's got a smartphone and it won't download the Zoom app. And Malawi hasn't got a contact number for Zoom. Can you imagine that? We can't dial in with Zoom into Malawi. Wow. So we're trying to find out all of those kinds of things. So, but it's opened up a lovely community. So we're trying to see how we can build on that. That's really special.
So great.
Yeah, thank you. Viswadeb, any last thoughts?
So this is also just happened to be with internship. We allow intern to come from the universities. The only strategy used to connect with the universities. That's the best part. But the difficulty part, the design of our organization, that our action based, based on CCs. So intern coming to URI, I don't have so much opening. All right. Thank you. So we like the having intern coming from the different university, because it gives us opportunity to get connections with the universities. But we don't have so much opportunity when intern comes. They like to experience the ground experience with the community.
Oh, yeah.
And all of our community work carried by cooperation circles. So I really can guarantee an intern to send them to CC, the cooperation circle, because the expenses are not provided by the cooperation circle. So intern has to pay their own everything, food, lodging, transportations, to experience work in the ground. And if they work with us in the administrative office, which they can come for 1 month and they can help. But then I need 7 to 10 days to teach them or to share with them what they can do. And then they'll have only 20 more days to help me, and I don't have 7 days to really share with them. It's too much. I'd rather do it on my own. So these are the little difficult part I'm facing. But again, the strategies that we always set up to create connections with the universities. So under that strategies, we always allow internships, even though it takes a lot of time of mine, but it helps region visibility, the connectivity with the universities.
Thank you for sharing. That's really wonderful. Alice, any closing remarks from you?
Oh, I would just say briefly that I had a nice conversation with somebody this morning that was helpful, and I appreciated that just by showing up as herself, this person was helpful. And that just was some sort of reminder on a deeper level about how if people can show up, if I can show up as myself, and if others can show up as themselves, then we can be often, I think, helpful to each other in ways that we don't even necessarily realize or won't even necessarily know.
Yeah.
So I just felt that was kind of a reassuring message about the universe and the role that we all play and where we are and what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I loved seeing all of y'all today, and can't wait till I can see some of y'all in person, or all of y'all in person in June. It'll be great fun. And and Shasta just woke up to say bye. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Good to see you all.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care. Ciao.
Bye-bye, puppy.
Bye, Mom. Mahmood.
Oh, cool.
She's looking at
Such a beautiful. Oh, my word, Linda. I want to have my tummy scratched like that.
Is that Is there a poodle in there?
A Bichon, and you'll meet her in June.
That's wonderful. She can
Just going-
stay.
travels with me. So, bye.